So I want to welcome everyone to the Immunition webinar. So not ammunition, immunition, your immune system. We want to turn that into a powerhouse. So let's do some stats. This is obviously from the Harvard Health publication, so it's going to be American statistics. We're here in Canada, or somebody could be watching this anywhere in the world, so just to give you an idea of some of the stats on this. So up to about 20% of Americans get the flu every year, and Americans suffer 1 billion colds. Children get cold and the flu more often than adults. Some kids get as many as 12 colds a year. Adults are usually averaging 2 to 4. So these are some of the common things that people are expecting as we're getting towards, quote unquote, the flu season or the cold season, whatever you want to call it. So you expect to be weary, tired, and run down. You get the old stuffy nose, love that. Expect to get achy. The sore throat, yuck. So we're going to call these limiting beliefs. Why is that? Well, we would like to be able to help people think that there's a different way to approach things and things that they could actually do to help their body work a lot better than it actually is, and maybe limit or even eliminate these challenges. So let's look forward here. So I'm not going to be talking a lot of technical stuff. I'm just going to be talking about your immune system is remarkable, but now we want it to become indestructible. So I'm going to go back for a second. I'm not going to be talking about a lot of biochemistry, and I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible in general. Like, I'm not trying to teach doctors anything about how the immune system works. But in case you don't know what the immune system does, just going to show you a pretty simple example. So your immune system, in our body, we have different systems. So the skin will be called the integumentary system. There's the digestive system. There's the cardiovascular system, so circulating blood, etc. So inside our circulation and inside our body tissues, it's not only in our blood, it's actually everywhere. There's something called the immune system. So in really simple terms, what does the immune system do? It protects your body from things from the outside that are not supposed to be in it or growing in it from exterior, but it also protects your body from the inside from aberrant things or things that go wrong on the inside, which can become big problems. So the immune system is like a surveillance system to make sure there's nothing bad from the outside compromising your body that way. And it's also working from the inside to make sure that there's nothing on the inside, like faults or defects that become big problems in it. So it's monitoring and checking things on the inside as well. So that's the simple way to kind of think of your immune system. Think of it as your body's protection system, okay? So I'm going to be going over 7 strategies to build an indestructible immune system. And I'm actually going to be a little contrary to what some people would think, because there's sort of a philosophical idea sometimes when people go to chiropractors, or sometimes chiropractors talk about making you like indestructible or invincible. And I don't want to fool people into thinking that, if you're getting like, eating right and doing all these 7 strategies, that you're never going to get sick. That isn't exactly what we mean by that, because sometimes your body is actually supposed to get sick. And I'll go over a little scenario a little bit after. But just know that if you do these 7 strategies, if you do get sick, you're going to be the best sick that you can possibly be. And I'll explain a little bit about that in a minute. Okay, so let's move on. So strategy number 1, we call this strategy, do the right thing. So what do I mean by that? Well, we have our good and our bad. And there's, generally most people have an idea of what they should hypothetically be doing as far as keeping themselves healthy and keeping their immune system healthy. So I'm just going to run over a few of the more common things, and then I'm going to highlight a few of the things that might not be so obvious to some people. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about contrarian thinking a little bit. So often you might hear in the news or the media, they keep telling you to do certain things over and over again, or they might have a certain point of view, and sometimes the exact opposite of what they're telling you is what you should be thinking about. Okay, so when you think of your immune system, I want you to think of different layers of it. And if you look at my body here, there's bacteria and germs in the environment, and they're floating in the air, and viruses and molds and all sorts of things. So what is the first line of defense that my body has? Well, the first line of defense is actually our skin. Okay, so we want to have good quality skin to prevent things from getting into our body. So that's why, if you cut yourself, you maybe, if your body's doing the right thing and you bleed pretty good, you might not even have to clean the wound or flush it out or anything. If it's bleeding out, then your body's actually doing the right thing to keep things out and flowing out, and then it'll start to heal and do that kind of stuff. So we want good integrity of your skin. So the first thing, you probably hear this a lot right now, especially in flu season. What's the number one thing they tell you all the time? Don't forget to wash your hands, right? But the problem is, your skin is very susceptible to being broken down if you're using high-end sort of antibiotic soaps, and soaps that have this thing called triclosan in it, which is a really horrible thing, actually. And most of the soaps have a lot of chemicals that can be actually dangerous to your skin. So there's something I'm going to be talking about later in your intestine. Some of you may have heard of something called probiotic bacteria. We call all those bacteria that are inside our intestines, we call it the microbiome. It's almost like it's like an organ in itself. It's a new organ they're talking about. But you actually have a surface microbiome too. So on top of my skin, there's billions and billions of bacteria and staphylococcus and streptococcus and all these horrible things. But there's a balance there. If my skin is healthy and I'm not wearing it down or degrading it, it'll stay healthy, and that microbiome, or the extrobiome I'm going to call it, on the skin will actually have the good ratio of the healthy bacteria to the bad bacteria. So that is actually your first line of protection out here. Okay, so that's your first strategy. Number one is to clean your hands, but just use regular soap. Anybody who knows the people in Italy, they used to make soap out of olive oil. So very often what happens is, if you use fat-containing products, like fatty things, they help actually attract the cell walls of the bad bacteria and stuff like that. So they're they get stuck in it, and then they kind of get carried away. So fatty things are good things to be putting on your skin, and I'll be talking about something later on for your health. But there's some good organic coconut oil. So you can actually use that on your skin, antibacterial, antimicrobial, good for moisturizing, no toxins for your body, and it's actually good for you on the inside and on the outside too. So I'm going to go back to sharing the screen again. Okay, so here's some of the other strategies. First of all, we're coming up to the season where we're kind of consuming a lot of alcohol. So alcohol, try to just consume it in moderation, because it is damaging to the body, and it does kill brain cells, and it weakens your body, it challenges your liver. Your liver is massively important for how you detoxify and get rid of toxins. So if your liver is being taxed because of the alcohol consumption, it's going to be very difficult for your body to protect itself. So try to maintain a healthy weight. So that's going to be challenging as we come up to the season. So I might give you a few tips that we might try to do to keep yourself in check on that, in that proportion there. One of the other things you might consider doing is trying to keep your diet, 80% of it, we call it greens, leaning more heavily towards vegetables, a little bit of fruits, and maybe like 80% would be greens, vegetables, raw things as much as possible. And then maybe 20%, if you do eat meat, the other 20% would be animal proteins of the high quality, which I'll get to that in a minute. The other things that can help your immune system, associating with positive people, I'll get in with that in the strategy later on. If you smoke, try to quit smoking. That would be great. You want to make sure you maybe try to clean your vegetables as well. If you get organic vegetables, there's probably less likely that there's junk on it, but you still want to clean it anyway. So there's some good healthy veggie washes, and some people use, like sodium bicarbonates and vinegars and things like that are kind of natural to clean your veggies, and there's some natural veggie sprays as well. So fast food, that's one of your biggest challenges during this season. It's convenient, it's fast, it's quick, but you try to want to run as fast as you can away from your fast food if that's possible. You're in command of your house, so you want to try to control at least what you're cooking and what you're eating. So that's really important. And then the other thing would be just to spend good time with your family and your loved ones, because that community, I'll get into that in another strategy, but that's a very important thing too. So the foundation of a healthy immune system is simply to give your body what it needs and to avoid what creates harm. This is the first strategy, and if you were to only take away one piece of advice from this whole thing, it would be to begin here, okay? It's pretty obvious. There's a lot of stuff here, but that's your first strategy. So I'm just gonna come back here for a second. I'm gonna talk about something here. So as far as the smoking, I'm gonna get into it later on, but there's the technique that I use in my office. It's called network spinal analysis. And it's a specific technique that helps the body develop strategies to make itself healthier on the inside. And I've been doing it for like maybe 20 years, maybe even more. And I've had about 13 people that have been in care that decided to quit smoking after about 4 to 6 months of care. And so that's an interesting thing, because usually the doctors say, well, quit smoking to get healthy. In this case here, your body actually gets healthy and it just decides to quit smoking. And that change can be permanent because your body finally became resourceful enough on the inside to not be addicted to that thing from the outside. So that's just something I'll get into a little later on when I talk about the care that I do. 2 is called judge a book by its cover. So what do I mean by that? So if you're watching TV or going in at the health food store, you're going to see a bazillion things that say it helps your immune system, immune fighting, immune boosting, that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to talk too much about like supplement stuff because there's lots of them out there. But we always just say if you could find one that hypothetically has research done on it, not just its ingredients, but actually on the substance itself, that would be good. So if you could find like an independent study that they said, they tested this against a placebo, with, they did 100 people in one group and 100 people in the other group, and they gave the people what we actually are selling, the actual thing that you buy, and then we gave the other 100 people a placebo that didn't have anything in it, or it was a sugar pill or whatever. If you can get that kind of research, that would be good. So there's lots of things on there. I'm basically going to be talking more about like, food and lifestyle stuff that you can do, not necessarily supplements, quote unquote, that are going to be boosting your immune system and that kind of thing. Strategy number 3, we want to say you are what you eat. So obviously the higher quality food you're putting in your body is a must. And I personally think there's a direct correlation between the obesity epidemic and a weak immune system that we see. And staying well, the nutrition has a really big impact on that whole thing. So if you're eating a lot of food, the best way to do it is saying, okay, what I'm putting in my body right now, is this going to help me build healthy cells and a healthy immune system, or is it going to clog me up and challenge my body? And the more your food is quote unquote alive, the better it is. So obviously it's sometimes it's expensive to eat completely organic. So there's something called the Environmental Working Group, who came up with what they call the Dirty Dozen. And most of the fruits that you eat the skin of, like blueberries, apples, strawberries, those kind of things, you try the best you can to get those organic, okay? Because they're going to be sprayed with loads of pesticides and stuff like that, and the genetically modified things and whatever else. So the more you can get your fruits and vegetables, and if you're eating like beans and grains and those kind of things as well, just try to get the majority of it as organic as you can. There's a few companies around here in Toronto that actually have organic foods delivered right to your door, so that would be a good thing too. So it's local and it's in season, all that kind of stuff. So even if you get like an organic kiwi, but it's coming from halfway across the world, all of that stuff. There's a lot of transport and things. I still eat those things occasionally, and I try to get them organic when I can. But just to give you an idea of how that is. So Environmental Working Group, you can look up that. They actually have an app called the Dirty Dozen, so you can actually put it on your cell phone when you go into the grocery store and you say, okay, garlic and avocados, anything with a big thick skin, you can probably get away with not having it organic. But things that you're eating the skin of, blueberries, strawberries, celery even as well, those kind of things, there's a number of them that just happen to be sprayed way more than others. So the more you can go towards organic, good quality foods, And the more you can have your foods live, meaning like fruits and veggies and things like that that are actually alive. Somebody asked me one time, can you teach me how to read a label? And I say, well, if it has a label on it, then it's not really food usually. So if you, for example, if you go in, fruits and vegetables, it's just the fruits and the vegetables, and that's all it is. But things that have like human stuff in it, like chemicals and things, then you have to start listing the ingredients, right? So basically, that's sort of like, think about that when you're buying your food. If it's in a box and has a label, and it's probably not really a food, and it takes energy away from your body to digest those foods, as opposed to giving your body energy. If you're taking like, if you look, talking about the rainbow of the kales and the red peppers and all, yellow peppers and apples and all those kind of things, blueberries, a lot of the berries and things, lots of different colors. All that stuff's great to give your body a lot of energy, and it powers up your immune system. Okay. Okay. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to talk about a number of different foods which might not be that obvious. Usually when people think about charging up their immune system, they're thinking about like foods that are quote unquote high in vitamin C, like oranges and yellow bell peppers and things like that. But I'm actually going to be talking about a few things which might surprise you. So I'm going to give you 4 different foods that are pretty important as far as your immune system, but they might be a little surprising to you. Remember I talked about the microbiome, the bacteria that's on the inside of your intestines? They're finding that that's probably one of the single most important things for the health of your immune system and your body in general. And so we have like, millions and millions of cells in our body, and there's like, there's like 100-fold more bacteria lining inside our intestines than there are cells in our body. And then there's something called the microbiome, which is viruses. So bacteria might be this big, viruses might be this big. So there's bazillions of viruses inside us too. But there's a good balance between ones that are beneficial and ones that are harmful. And it's usually about 80% good, 20% bad, and that would be the ideal situation. So you want to make sure that that microbiome, so that organ on the inside, we're actually calling this a third organ. This weighs about 3 to 5 pounds, almost as much as your brain, sort of thing. So there's a lot of good stuff in there. We call those commensal organisms. Mensa meaning eat, so commensal meaning they're eating with us. So a lot of the food that we actually physically, if we didn't have any of those bacteria, lots of our nutrition wouldn't come out of our food. Like a lot of the fibers and things like that, and a lot of the vitamins that are kind of locked up inside vegetables and fiber, those things actually eat that for lunch, sort of thing. There's like a prebiotic fiber called inulin, not insulin, but inulin. So they kind of feed on that, and they break down fibers, and they actually liberate a lot of important B vitamins and a lot of really important things for our body. So the bacteria inside our gut are actually feeding our body with good nutrition. So it's important that the bacteria on the inside of our gut is extremely healthy. So how can we help that bacteria be healthy? So what they're finding is, before we had refrigerators, how they used to store foods for a long time is they would ferment them, meaning that they would let the bacteria, natural bacteria, kind of dissolve all the sugars, and it would kind of become not sweet. If it was a sweet thing, it would become kind of sour, but it would stay edible for a long, long time. So all those bacteria that actually kind of make things like sauerkraut and things like kefir or certain cheeses and things like that, those bacteria are actually really beneficial for our internal health. So one of the things that people are turning to now, they're eating things like sauerkraut again, that's coming back into vogue, and kefir is another one. So what we want to do, there's a company, I'm going to talk about dairy products in a minute. So I saw a question here. For over 15 years, I'm just going to check this question for a second. I have not drank cow's milk. I heard that milk has mucus-inducing properties that leads to colds. For 15 years, I have barely had 1 or 2 colds a year. Is there any truth to the correlation between not drinking cow's milk and fewer colds? Awesome question. I don't know who asked that, but it's a good question. And we'll talk about that in a second, because there's a big thing to understand about milk, actually. So milk, on one hand, I know about this sort of concept of being mucus-producing, highly allergenic, probably one of the worst things that you could put in your body. But then there's a whole other category of it, which actually might end up being the healthiest thing you could put in your body. So I'm going to talk about this difference. So milk, the typical sort of vegetarian stance on it is, there's no animal in the wild that drinks milk after it's weaned, which is pretty true. I know there are a few animals, so there are always some exceptions. But they say, well, I'm not a cow, so why should I be drinking cow's milk? So you can take that from that fundamental philosophical point of view, which I understand, which is cool. But there are some cultures in the world that live a really long time, like some indigenous cultures. They actually revere their animal. They might have a cow or something, and they bring the cow with them as they're traveling. Some of them I've seen them, they poke the cow in the neck to get blood, and they drink the blood, but they stop the bleeding, or they'll be milking the cow, so that this cow will actually be giving them sustenance for days or months, and that's the only thing they have, actually. So there are a lot of societies that actually use animals to kind of, give them milk. So what's the big problem with milk? So that allergenic aspect of it, thousands of years ago, something happened. A protein is a long chain of a bunch of amino acids stuck together, and they kind of all twist around and become a protein. So there's a protein inside milk called beta casein. There's a lot of different proteins, but this is one of the specific ones. And thousands of years ago, one amino acid got switched for some reason. Some people don't know why. It just might have randomly happened, or whatever it is. But it changed the conformation of that protein. And so the healthy milk would be something called A2 beta casein. The bad milk is A1 beta casein. And all the milk in North America is A1 beta casein. And so you take this changed, modified protein, and it all of a sudden becomes a massive allergen for the body, and it can be linked to a lot of things like diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, cancers, inflammation, mucus, asthma, all sorts of stuff. If you actually find an A2 beta casein milk, it might actually be one of the healthiest things in the world if you get it unpasteurized. So what is pasteurization? Basically, they take the liquid and they throw it over top of this big sheet of a really hot substance that tries to, quote unquote, kill the bad bacteria. So there's no bad bacteria, but you're actually killing the vital enzymes and the life. You're making it dead food now, basically. So trying to digest the dead food is actually challenging for your system. It takes a lot of energy away from you, etc. So if you could get raw, like unpasteurized A2 beta casein milk, that would be great. We're kind of stuck here in Canada for sure. There's one guy in the States, Jordan Rubin, who actually had this big 3,000-acre ranch, and he actually reverse engineered a bunch of cows. So on his farm, he actually has cows that produce A2 beta casein milk. There's a lot of milks I think in Europe, in Australia for sure. They actually, if you go to Australia, apparently they actually sell both types of milk. You can actually buy an A1 or an A2. You can actually make a choice on which one you have. So if you could hypothetically find a raw, sort of unpasteurized milk from a local farmer, I know it's a whole bit of controversial thing here, but pasteurized milk, regular A1 milk, super inflammatory, could probably cause half of the allergies in the world are probably related to that. If you can find A2 beta casein, much better off. So that's one of the actual things that's very, very helpful for your immune system is actually A2 unpasteurized beta casein milk. So I guess the one thing we could look for in Canada is that goat's milk and sheep's milk still maintain the A2 conformation. So if you could get raw goat's milk, raw sheep milk, or raw goat's cheese or raw sheep cheese, those are actually pretty good alternatives, actually. So I know they don't taste as good as regular milk, sort of thing, and they probably don't taste as good, the cheese or whatever, but make a bit of a compromise for your health in your life, and it's actually okay. So I have a couple notes here. So fermented foods, some other things too. So soy products in general, most people know now that you want to be avoiding soy, but there are some fermented soy products which are actually pretty beneficial once again because they're getting bacteria, healthy bacteria. So that would be things like miso, tempeh, natto. None of those taste that good. Tempeh is pretty bland, so that can be, you could use that almost like if you're like your ground beef substitution, and it basically just tastes like whatever you make it in. So if you're putting sauces or adding seasoning to it, then it'll be okay. Just looking at some other notes I have. Kefir is the big one. So if you want to try to avoid sugars, don't get the flavored kefirs. Just add your own flavoring to it, or just try to put it in a shake or something. So because if you're adding sugar to a kefir, you're kind of defeating the purpose. Because one of the big problems with sugar, by the way, and I don't know if I talked about this at any point, I took it in my notes, but sugar, the molecule of sugar, glucose, looks really similar to the molecule of vitamin C. They're almost like the same shape. So if people have sugar in their diet, what happens is it actually takes up the spots where vitamin C would normally be acting on your cells. And so vitamin C doesn't have the big impact on your cells to create healthy changes and to be an antioxidant and things like that. So they say if you take white sugar and it actually depresses your immune system for a number of hours after you eat something with sugar in it. And one of the biggest things too, I kind of agree with Dr. Hyman, Mark Hyman. He says it's not so much the sugar that you yourself are adding to food, like a teaspoon of sugar to your coffee or whatever. It's all the stuff that's in food everywhere that you're buying now. So packaged foods, for example, there's a lot of things that have sugar in it that you wouldn't even expect to have sugar, because a lot of times even salty foods, they're putting sugar in it, and that combination of the sugar and the salt makes it more feeds your brain and makes you more addicted to it. So like condiments, salad dressings, ketchup, mustard, all sorts of crackers, all sorts of things. You'd be surprised where sugar is. It's almost in everything now. So there's so much of it. We should have like just maybe this much in a year. Now people are having like 150 pounds of it a year, sort of thing, even more. So there are some alternatives to sugar, and the thing to be looking for. So that was the fermented food. So very important for immune system health, because the microbiome, once again, is very important for your immune system. So I'm just going to go back a little bit and I'm going to talk about a history. How does your microbiome get developed? And this is a very important thing, and it's a very important thing for me being a pediatric chiropractor. So I'm going to explain something to you here. Here's our healthy young little boy. Okay, so normally the baby's inside mom, floating inside the womb. And as the baby actually comes out through the vaginal canal, pretty much inside the womb, this environment should be more or less sterile. So the baby's just kind of getting, food from mom through the umbilical cord sort of thing, but the environment is pretty sterile, so the baby doesn't have much bacteria or viruses on it or anything. But it has to develop a microbiome just like we do. So where does it get all those good bacteria? Well, it actually gets it as it passes out mom's canal, the birth canal. So, back in the vaginal area and the genital area of mom, she's got all these great bacteria like bifidobacteria, lactobacillus, all these kind of things that are massively important for your digestive health. So as the baby's coming out, the baby's actually getting colonized with those bacteria. Those bacteria make their way into the nose and the ears and the mouth and go into the body and actually develop the healthy bacteria over time on the inside of this baby. So baby is getting its massive, this is the single most important thing that will determine your kid's health, is that you actually have the birth vaginally, if you can, okay? So unfortunately, the trend now is just to do like, what do we call it? Convenient C-sections. So just because the doctor, timing, whatever it is, all that kind of stuff. And if you take it out through the belly, you cut through the belly and you take the baby out that way, they're just getting exposed to whatever might be on the gloves of the doctor who's been in the room for the last 15 minutes. And on your skin here, you don't have bifidobacteria, so you have more like, staphylococcus, streptococcus, strep mutans, and all these things that are not really that great for the baby. And so unfortunately, they're getting colonized with that. And surprisingly, in the last 10 or 15 years, we have this massive increase in allergies, colicky babies, skin conditions, all that kind of stuff. And just as a side note, the health of your skin is a reflection of the health of your intestine, more or less. So if your intestine is leaky and it's leaking proteins and things into your blood that shouldn't be there, your body's going to want to try to get rid of it somehow, because just think of your blood being itchy almost, because the histamine reactions and all this kind of stuff, so it needs to get it out. So it'll actually try to push it out through the baby's skin, and you start to see eczema and rashes and all that kind of stuff coming out of the baby. The body's trying to get rid of it somehow. And unfortunately, the standard treatment for that usually would be to put a cortisone cream on it, and that prevents the body from getting it out through the skin. So usually it pushes it deeper, and then the next deeper organ would be the lungs. So very often eczema and allergy type of things on the skin of the baby, all of a sudden putting the creams on it was actually pushing it deeper, and then they'll end up having asthma and breathing difficulties and things like that later on, which is a big challenge. So challenge number one for all parents out there, do whatever you can to have a vaginal birth. Don't kick yourself if you've already had a C-section. I know some lady said, oh, it was great, I didn't feel anything, and the baby came out, and there it is. And there's a lot of kids that might be born with C-sections that never have any problems, but there's always, genetic susceptibilities that left and right. But it's actually very important, the best you can. That's going to give your kid the biggest step for its health for the future, is to have the baby born vaginally and to breastfeed as soon as it comes out. The second worst thing you could do, or almost worse than that, is to give a baby a bottle just because it's not latching properly right away. The baby can survive for a while, and even if the letdown doesn't come, a lot of the colostrum at the beginning is pretty clear, and people think, oh, he's not getting enough nutrition. Just keep working at it the best you can, because that first meal is one of the most important things that has to come from mom. Sometimes they're putting like sugar water in the baby. That's the first meal, like a refined white sugar or high fructose corn syrup in a water solution. It's a big mess. Sorry, that's a discussion for a whole other workshop, so I won't go too far on that, but that's just another thing for parents to consider. Next thing on my list, grass-fed beef. What they're doing right now, they're doing something called factory farming, where they have to produce a lot of beef and they have to produce a lot of meat because there's people buying it, and so they're just going to mass producing it. And unfortunately, they're feeding cows things that they're not supposed to be eating. Cows really aren't supposed to be eating grains and soy products and all that stuff, but because those crops are subsidized, it makes them really cheap. So it's cheaper to feed cows a lot of corn and soy products. Over 90% of those are genetically modified now. And sometimes they're even feeding cows, like they're, that mad cow disease and all that kind of stuff. They're eating things that they're not supposed to be eating. So if you're lucky enough to find something called grass-fed beef, grass-fed poultry, or just any kind of animal that's supposed to be grazing, when they are grazing, they're actually producing healthy meat and healthy milk. So there are a couple of companies here, and I've kind of looked for this stuff now. So as far as grass-fed beef, there's I'm trying to show you things that are kind of readily available in areas around here. So Life Choices is a company, and they do chicken, beef, pork, and fish. Beef on grass-fed beef. So this would be the one that I would be choosing for my family, probably, just because it's pretty convenient, and it's found in even like a Longo's or Fortino's. The bigger stores have these, so you don't have to necessarily go to a health food store to find it. But so they're raising these without the use of antibiotics or added hormones. They're grass-fed, it's gluten-free, and it's uncooked. So these are all very important fundamental things. And one of the big things about the grass, when cows are eating grass, they're actually producing an essential a very important fatty acid called CLA, which is conjugated lactic acid. There's only one other thing that produces that, and that would be mother's milk, actually. So you either get it from mother's milk or you get it from grass-fed cows. So it's a pretty important thing if you think about how important breastfeeding is for a baby. That's one of the more important fats that comes out of it. So that's one company here, and I know Row Farms is another one that has some pretty good grass-fed beef. So one of my little, I guess, stickler points for some of these companies, though, they have products that, like the chicken products, when they have nuggets or coated things, almost always unfortunately, they're using soy protein as the batter, and I don't like that, basically. So that's just one thing to try to avoid would be just try to get the beef without any coatings on it, because it's very common for them to actually use canola oil as well, and canola oil is a pretty yucky thing too. So you don't want to be having canola oil on top. So it's one of my pet peeves. I have this or something organic, all the ingredients are organic, and then they use canola oil for some reason because it's cheap, basically. So everything is great, and then they use canola oil to fry it or to make the batter or whatever, and unfortunately that's not a good thing. So usually I wouldn't get that if they have canola oil in it. So there's a lot of great benefits there. So basically that green from the grass, the life from the grass, the cow is eating it, and it's transforming that into some great nutrition for your body. So if you are eating meat. So, one of those burgers they're pretty thick, so you could actually cut it in half. You don't want to go too crazy with your protein, and just maybe half for you and half for somebody else in the family, that kind of thing, or cut it in half that way. And, but that's a pretty good option for getting that. And there's a lot of great amino acids and zinc and a bunch of other things that are important for your immune system. Next thing on the list would be coconut oil. So this is going to become the next superfood. If you haven't heard about this already, it's kind of making its way in the media. There was a lot of bad press for it in the past because they call it a saturated fat, and as you can see, it's actually a solid. Oh, look at that, got the lid on it. But it is a solid at room temperature, and some of the doctors say, well, it's a solid at room temperature. You don't want that clogging up your veins. And I say, okay, well, I'm not room temperature, right? I'm a myriad of degrees higher than room temperature, so when it gets hot in the summer, this turns into a liquid, so it's totally fine. And the end result of that is that every cell in your body, the membrane around your cells is made out of fats. And surprisingly, it's basically saturated fats, and cholesterol is the thing that makes your cells up. And more importantly, your nerves, your brain, is almost all made out of fats and cholesterol. So if you want that to work properly, you need to be taking in a lot of good saturated fats, and that's your number one. Other ones, sources would be grass-fed beef, grass-fed animal products, and avocado oil is another. Avocados themselves, great source of saturated, or monounsaturated in that case, but more of the great fats that are good for your health and your brain. So when you try to get this, of course, 100% extra virgin, organic. So that's what you want to be looking for. Obviously, organic, raw, extra virgin as best you can. And some of the other just some of the other things to look for as far as sort of ingredients that might be important. And I don't necessarily say in your multivitamins and stuff like that, but some of the important ones would be selenium, vitamin A, vitamin B2, vitamin B6, vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E, zinc, echinacea, and garlic might be good as well, ginseng. And the other one would be high quality probiotics, once again, to help the intestinal flora. And one product that I actually recommend to my patients, I'm going to show this too as well. When they talk about a number of big deficiencies as far as food because of how they're farming and destroying the soil and all that stuff, they get a lot into minerals, and like magnesium is probably one of the biggest ones that's missing and stuff. But from my perspective on what's been happening in the last 15 to 20 years, on how they've been trying to tell people to lose weight, and because they see this big obesity epidemic happening, they've mistakenly been telling people to decrease their fat. So all of a sudden, there's all this, everything is low fat, no fat, fat free, and if you're taking the fat out of it, you're taking the flavor out of it, so you have to add sugar or artificial sweeteners, and those are horrible for your body, for your immune system, and for your microbiome. Aspartame and the artificial sweeteners actually wreck your microbiome. They make you more hungry, and they make you gain weight. So people who keep putting the artificial sweeteners in their sugars and coffees and things like that, they're actually doing themselves a disservice. They're doing their brain a disservice because they're excitotoxins, and they can actually burn out your brain cells. But they actually ruin the microbiome, specifically those cells on the inside. And the other thing, two other things that will wreck the microbiome, those healthy bacteria, are processed foods and genetically modified food. So you really want to try to avoid that stuff as much as possible. But in my office here, there's a specific oil that I give my patients. This is the oil here. It's called Om oil, A-U-U-M, and this is a specific omega-3 oil. So we all know omega-3s are very important. So, there's an omega-3 and omega-6 ratio. So if you're getting grass-fed beef, you're getting a better ratio of that stuff. So omega-6 would be the ones that would be causing more inflammation and things. And you don't want to go overboard and just take all omega-3s, and you might shift your body too much in the other direction too. You want a good balance. So this one is very balanced. But for me, one of the biggest deficiencies, if you want to call it, not like a mineral or not like a vitamin, is actually fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin A, D, E, and K. Those ones there are massively important for the health of our body. We're all kind of learning how important vitamin D is. You're hearing that more and more and that kind of thing. But vitamin A, E, and K, K2, very important as well. Just because people are avoiding fat so much, they're actually limiting those vitamins. So vitamin A, for example, very important for your mucous membrane. So your skin is very important to protect you here, but the mucous membranes inside lining here, and all that stuff, vitamin A is really important for that. Vitamin E is important for skin health and a bunch of other things too. So A, E, very important, and it's pretty important to kind of take them all around the same time. So just taking a vitamin D supplement probably might cause a functional problem or functional deficiency in other things. So you don't want to just take one thing, like I'm just going to take 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C or whatever. You want to take like whole food kind of things. Or this, for example, this isn't a fish oil. This actually comes from a mammal. So this comes from Canadian harp seals, actually. And the interesting thing is we all know about omega-3s and how important they are. But when you take it from a fish or krill or all those kind of things, your body has to kind of change it a little bit to make it more bioavailable. Because this one is actually coming from a warm-blooded animal like us, okay, a warm-blooded mammal. It's actually the same configuration as the omega-3s that would be coming from your mother in the breast milk. It's the same configuration, so it automatically fits right into your brain right away. So this one here specifically has vitamin D3, cholecalciferol, and vitamin A as well. So you're getting the omega-3 is actually called those vitamin F actually. So we have vitamin A, vitamin D, and the omega-3s, and we've heard about EPA and DHA. This one actually has another one called DPA, which is another one that you don't find in fish oils, and that's important for your brain health. And I see a lot of kids that have challenges, learning problems, autism spectrum, ADHD kids, and very often when they take this, it can help them improve as well because it goes right up into the brain. You take it sublingually, and after about 30 to 60 seconds, it's into the circulation and it's getting up into the brain and also creating cardiovascular benefits and other things, and of course helping your immune system as well. So that's only available through practitioners. So if you want something like this, you'd actually have to call the office and come to us to get it actually. When I talked about vitamin K2, so one of the other fat-soluble vitamins, there's a company here, it's an Ontario company, Canadian company, it's called Rolling Meadows. This is where you're going to get your dairy products or your yogurts or your kefirs or your butter. So this is my favorite right here. You're going to get what they call Rolling Meadows salted butter. So it's made with sea salt and it's grass-fed dairy. So this butter right here tastes really good. And because it's grass-fed, the cows are eating the grass and they're actually converting a vitamin K into vitamin K2, which is very, very important for how your body handles its calcium. So we know calcium is important, and I'm not really telling you to have the dairy products for the calcium because you can get it out of your almonds and green leafy vegetables. You get calcium all over the place, and vitamin D helps you take calcium from your food. It'll help you uptake it more into your body. But it's important, vitamin K2 is actually the vitamin that helps to put it where it's supposed to go. So it'll put it into the bones or put it into the muscles or wherever it needs to be. If you don't have good vitamin K2, it can actually just go in other places. Like it might go around your muscles, it might stick to your tendons, it might harden your arteries, it could cause calcification in your joints. So we're seeing this calcification in all these weird places. So it could be hardening your arteries, hardening your muscles. So you're getting more rigid, that kind of stuff. Cataracts as well, another thing. So it's precipitating out in the eye area. So this would be very important. So if you're taking an almond oil, for example, with the vitamin A, D, and then you're taking this butter regularly, quite a bit of this, when you're doing your cooking, you're sauteing your foods, whatever, you're using that regularly, that'll help you with your vitamin K2. So you're covering all the bases of your fat-soluble vitamins. So this is my kefir that I would be using. So the Rolling Meadows kefir. Once again, just try to avoid the flavored ones. Same thing with the yogurt if you're going to get it. Of course, I'd be recommending getting the highest fat yogurt you can. Don't get the flavored ones, and don't get the ones that are low fat. Go for the full fat. Same thing if you're going to have milk, dairy, cow's milk, you can do this one, and I'd always get the highest fat one you can get. Once again, if you want to avoid the A2 problem, then you would be getting goat's milk or sheep's milk. And of course, you can always get almond milk and all that kind of stuff, the other alternatives that exist out there. All right, strategy number 4, control the space between your ears. So what do we mean by that? Well, we actually know that your mind and your thought process has a very big impact on your immune system. So when you're down in your thoughts, you can be down in your immune system. And we know that very often people that are suffering from depression and things like that, they're more susceptible to get colds and to be sick and just not feel good in general. And we know that the stress hormone cortisol, which is released when people have stress, it has a really big role on having a bad impact on your immune system. So how I explain that is when you have stress, and stress is always perceived in your brain, in your thought process, because you're just responding to the situation. So however you're responding to it, cortisol would be your stress hormone, and it should just come out in just little peaks, just brief little episodes. But because we have it on a constant basis, the way we're living our lives in North America, it's actually putting your body into a situation where it should just be a temporary thing where it's going to be, we call it down-regulating. It's going to be down-regulating your fertility system because you don't need to think about having babies when you have to run away from, the tiger sort of thing. It's going to down-regulate your immune system. It's going to down-regulate your digestion, blood flow to your brain, all sorts of things, because those aren't necessary in that moment for you to survive. So it's a survival mechanism, but it should be very, very temporary just to get you out of a bad situation. But if you constantly have a stress thought process in your brain, then your body's going to respond in that way, and that'll keep your immune system down regulated. And so meaning that it's not functioning as good as it can. So what are some of the strategies we can use? So one of the things I would recommend, if people are into meditation, I've tried it a few times. I'm never that good at it, but if you like meditating, that's a great thing. Deep breathing is just one of the easiest things you can do. It doesn't take much. And sometimes if you breathe out for a lot longer than you breathe in, that helps to get your body more into a calming kind of state. You could use visualization. Sometimes, cut up pictures of happy people, put up pictures of yourself when you're happy, look at yourself. Reconfirm those kind of things that life can have has its ups and downs. We just try to focus on the times that are positive, and that's good. You can read motivational quotes. One of the biggest things that turns most parents on, just take a bunch of great pictures of your kids, goofy pictures of your kids when they're smiling, or just looking at your kids in general. That can be very, very helpful and get you out of sort of like a stressful funk. Just think, okay, there's my kid. He's happy, smiling, and that's always great to see. Try to reflect on something that brings you joy. Sometimes music can be very, very motivating. Put on some old music that you had when you were in high school and when everything was great, and you were in elementary school, those kind of things. Put on some old music. And if you are having some sort of difficulty and you need some help, I'm going to recommend the psychotherapist in our office. This is Melanie here. So she was a life coach for many years, and now she's actually a psychotherapist, and she does great work if you need to get over some things. I've had some patients that have had difficulties just getting out and socializing, and just having some stressful situations in their lives, and they've gone through Melanie. There's a technique called emotional freedom technique, which is a specific thing where you can tap on certain parts of your body that can kind of get your body over some pretty traumatic things. So she knows how to teach that, which is a very important thing. So if you need some help in that sort of mindset, just try to get in touch with Melanie. Another thing that can be very beneficial for your thought process in your brain is just to pamper yourself a little bit. So also in our office, we have 3 wonderful massage therapists, Jonathan, Belinda, and Janet. So this is their website. If you go to steelsn404rmt.com, that's their website there. You can also get to them from my main page here, which is on this page. If you go to meet the staff, meet the team, right here. If you go to that link there, that will open up a page where you'll be able to meet all the staff members, and you'll be able to click on a link, and that'll take you to this page, and this is where you can make appointments. And there's some good research actually showing that just getting your body touched by somebody else in the right way, like a therapeutic touch, is actually very, very beneficial for your immune system, and it also helps your lymphatic system too, which is very important for eliminating toxins and things like that, and helping your immune system function properly. All right, so now we're going to get into the more interesting stuff. So we're going to talk about moving and not moving. So exercising regularly, the likelihood of you acquiring a cold or other viral illness is actually significantly reduced. And there's been a lot of studies that show this. There's one study we saw that staying active cut the risk of contracting a cold by half, and it cut the severity of the symptoms by 1/3 among those people who actually did catch a cold. Researchers noted that each round of exercise may lead to a boost in the circulating immune system cells that would help ward off a virus. So rest is very important, and that's my biggest challenge, if I want to be honest with people. I've always been a night owl, and I have difficulty getting to bed because I'm always staying up late to prepare these kind of things, etc. But that's my biggest challenge. But we actually know that getting the 2 hours before midnight are probably the most beneficial hours of sleep that you can get, because you actually get a lot of more REM sleep, more recuperation, more cleaning out of your system in those 2 hours. So the more you can get to bed before midnight, the better it is. So exercise is really important. So there's a lot of different ways to exercise. And just to get some variety, you can try spin. Obviously, make sure you have a professionalist, watching, make sure it's okay to do these things. But you could try spin classes. You can try weight training, which is really good. And dancing is another great one. Some of the other things I came up with, gymnastics, something you might not think about. You want to be careful of doing like the Tough Mudder things if you're not really conditioned. Obviously, you don't want to be jumping over big walls and things like that. But there are some obstacle courses, things that which are kind of cool. You know, the boot camps, make sure you have a good instructor that understands your body and your level, your capacity. And my favorite thing, I didn't get the website open for it, but it's using something called a cellar sizer, or it's a rebounder. And that's actually the best place to do exercises on one of these rebounders. So the bouncer one, there's two really high-end ones, but the cellar sizer is my favorite. So you're actually bouncing on a trampoline, basically. So you can run on it, and you can do exercises, calisthenics, and whatever else. But that sort of up and down motion on that rebounder, that acceleration and deceleration, actually helps move all the cells in your body. They all kind of get a little bit of an exercise. They all get a bit of a workout. But the big good thing about that is that sort of suction actually helps to move your lymphatic system. So you have circulating blood inside your vessels, but the lymphatic system is all the fluid that's everywhere else in your body, and there's way more of that than there's of your blood. And you can think of that like your sewer system. So that has to be cleaned out regularly, and doing up and down motion on the cellar sizer or on the rebounder is one of the best things that help to clean that system out over time. Okay, so that's my favorite. And my kid I have it in my living room, and I call it excuseless exercising because it's only about like a meter and a half, whatever it is. You can plop it down. You can just bounce up and down while you're watching a TV show or when it's a commercial or wherever it is. My favorite type of exercise in general, the one that they're finding is very beneficial for just global health, and it helps something called the human growth hormone be produced in your body. Human growth hormone, think about that one as the one that's making you younger, your longevity kind of hormone, the one that makes your body grow and be healthy. So there's something called high intensity interval training or surge training or burst training. I have some videos of that online if you look up Dr. Marco Burst Training or Surge Training, SURGE. You can see a video of me doing that on the cellar sizer specifically. So that's a really great type of exercise if you have a pretty good system. If your adrenal system, if you're kind of fatigued, your adrenals are kind of blown and you don't have any good adrenal system, that would actually be too challenging for you. And the best exercise for you would just be a slow walk for like an hour. Just walk, 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 take your time, go outside, look at the trees, don't put on headphones or anything, and just try to be relaxed, because if your adrenal glands are already blown out, you don't need to be doing heavy intensity exercise. But if you have a pretty good overall health, the high intensity interval training or the surge training is the best thing you can do, because it's very brief, very intense, but it cleans out all the sugar that's floating around in your blood, cleans out your glycogen stores, which was your stored sugar, and your body actually burns fat for the next 2 days. So that's one of the big strategies that people are using now to actually, in a short period of time, get their body burning fat better and having more growth hormone, human growth hormone produced in their circulation. The other thing that helps human growth hormone come out, which is your longevity hormone, keeping you healthy on the inside, is something called intermittent fasting. So that's the type of thing where you actually eat dinner, but then you try to go as long as you can before you have your next meal. So you have dinner maybe at 6 or 7 o'clock, and then you don't eat anything all night. You don't have breakfast, the most important meal of the day, which it isn't. And then you might go to 12, 1 or 2 o'clock, and then that might be your first meal. And so one of the strategies I tell people, if you're already eliminating one meal, so you're not thinking about what you're going to make for breakfast, and if you make lunch a really great smoothie that has a lot of great stuff in it, so you're putting in, kale and greens and spinach and that kind of thing, so you're getting a lot of good high greens in there. You might be adding the grass-fed kefir, grass-fed milk if you're going to use it, or almond milk, whatever your other things are. Putting in your blueberries, great for brain health, great for your immune system. Other kind of berries, you want to keep to the berries if you can. You're going to add some, you can sometimes add coconut oil, but there's a derivative of coconut oil called the medium chain triglyceride. This is one of my favorites. So MCT oil, that stands for medium chain triglycerides. This actually stays a liquid at room temperature, so you can add this. That increases the fat burning capacity of that meal that you're making. And it's important to always have fats inside a high density meal, because fats help transport all that extra nutrition into your system. So it's a really important thing to have a lot of good healthy fats when you make a shake. So the fats will actually help transport like the stuff from the vitamins and that, the Vitamix or whatever you're using that blends up and busts up all that good nutrition. It needs to be carried into your system. It's actually carried in via the fat. So that's very important to always add fat when you're doing that. So strategy number 6 is be madly in love. So obviously if you don't have a partner, be in love with yourself. That's rule number one. You have to be able to love yourself before you can love somebody else. But, try to be aware and be respectful and love the people in your life as best you can. Love your children, love your spouse, your parents. There's always ups and downs in life, and there's enough positives and negatives all the time. But just try to see that love is the balance of all of those things, because somebody can't be always positive all the time, and they can't always be the greatest person. They have to have up and downs, and love means you can see both sides of that and being good with the fact that both of those exist all the time. Dr. John DeMartini, if you want to look him up, he's one of the best guys that helped me sort of understand that kind of concept. And so, everyone asks me, how can I stay calm when there's all these bad things happening and that kind of stuff? And I always know that there's always positive and negative in every situation. Even if it seems really, really horrible, there always is both. And you just have to be able to pull back enough to see both of them, because there's always, with every hurt, there's a gift, especially within your body and your spine and that kind of stuff too. And there's an important thing, not just talking about love, but just talking about community. Just as far as the health of your system, there was a study done in the United States. I don't remember what city it was or where it was, but I just know it happened quite a while ago, like maybe in the 60s or something. There was a community that had extremely low levels of heart disease, cancer, diabetes. And it was like a pocket of a community that was just really kind of strange compared to everything else. And they looked at all things like, what they were eating and their smoking habits and everything, and they were trying to figure it out, and nothing made sense. The only thing they found out was their habits. So this community was actually a bunch of Italian immigrants that all came over from Italy, and they kept the same habits that they had in Italy, meaning so if they were going to build a house, they all got together and built somebody's house. After their meals, they would go out and they would all walk together. So that's very typical in Italy and Europe. They actually have like a walk or caminata after you have your meal. Everyone gets together and they're all in this main area of the city, and you're always around other people. So that community, that connection is always there. And just that, having contact with people, laughing, having good food and good, company, all of that can have a big positive impact on your immune system as well. All right, so that's a really important thing. So try to connect with your community, with your people that you love. And then the most important strategy, and the reason why I'm here, is to actually talk about what we call the master controller. So we call this the secret sauce, and I call it the biggest blind spot in people's healthcare. So I know people that do all the right things. They eat well, they exercise, they sleep. But even if they do all those right things, the biggest thing that they're missing is taking control of their nervous system. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with somebody named Deepak Chopra, but he had a book a while ago. I don't remember which one it was, but I remember the quote. He says, the immune system and the nervous system is the same system. It's just that one of them is circulating. So that's a very, very important quote. So what that means is the health of your nervous system will relay into the health of your immune system. So I just want you to think that they're talking to each other. So there's all these nerves that have their connections near your blood vessels, and white blood cells and other immune system cells are passing by it, and they're constantly communicating with each other with these little chemicals. So let's say if I step on a rusty nail breaks through my foot, the nervous system gets signal that the skin has been pierced, there's damage. All of a sudden, all my brain and all my nerve system starts to send messages to these white blood cells that know they have to start making their way down there and doing the work that they have to do to protect my body. So back in the old days, there was a there was a massive flu epidemic. They call it the flu pandemic. And they found that people that were actually getting regular chiropractic care had much better, this was killing millions and millions of people around the world. The people that were getting chiropractic care, they wouldn't understand why at that time, but they were actually having much, much higher survival rates compared to traditional care that they were getting with drugs or doing whatever else. And they're finding that there's a specific area of your spinal cord when you have a positive, when you put positive movement into the spine in specific areas, that positive movement will actually stimulate a certain area of your spine called lamina 7, and that goes in and it actually affects your sympathetic nervous system. It helps your parasympathetic system work properly. So there's two sides of your body, and there's a system, we call it the autonomic system, which has your gas pedal and your brake. And you can see that poster there, and you can probably read a little bit. One's gas pedal, one's brake pedal. But the nervous system, the thing that chiropractors work with the most, it's really important that that nervous system, autonomic one, is working properly. You don't want to be stuck on the gas, and you don't want to be stuck on the brake, because it can cause extremes of your body on both sides. So specifically, when people have a lot of stress, what happens is their parasympathetic nervous system, which is controlled by a big nerve that comes out of your head, is called the vagus nerve, and that goes down and it controls all your organs, your stomach acid secretion, digestion, all your liver. Basically does everything in your belly, all the organs are there, to about halfway across your large intestine. So all of that stuff, your immune system, everything is controlled really by that nerve that comes out of your skull here, and it passes right in front of the first vertebrae in your neck. So unfortunately, when kids are born, it's very typical that doctors would pull in their heads to pull them out of mom if they do a cesarean section, or if they do a vaginal birth, they pull on babies' heads. And that can often cause a lot of stress right up in there, and that could sometimes cause a disturbance to that nerve, which would be controlling the child's digestion. So we often have kids that are projectile vomiting, or they have colic, a lot of gassy stuff. They're not digesting their food because that control from that system isn't working. So normally when babies are born, they're really almost all what we call sympathetic. So it's just very, very fast, heart's beating fast, lungs are beating fast, and breathing fast. Everything's very, very accelerated. When they start to develop and they start to get stimulation from their environment, people touching them and touching their body and all that kind of stuff, all that starts to send stimulation up to the right side of their brain, which will put on the brakes. And so then their breathing rate starts to come down, their heart rate starts to come down, and it starts to normalize. But very often when kids have had that stress in their neck right from the birth process, a lot of that vagus nerve input from the one side won't be working. And so they'll always be stuck in that stress response. So that makes their digestive system weak. That can lead them to have leaky gut syndromes, digestive problems, allergies, all sorts of things. So it's very important to get your children checked. Their neck, well, their whole spine needs to be checked, because sometimes they're upside down and they pull on the legs to pull them out if they're doing a C-section. But you need to check their whole spine, because think of the spine as we call it a neural functional organ. So the whole thing needs to work properly for you to work properly, because between each bone in your back, there's nerves that come out that control organs. And the movement of the spine is what keeps your brain healthy. So that's a really, really important thing. So to get back to that whole scenario there was that big flu epidemic, the pandemic, the people that were getting spinal care because that was stimulating the nervous system, that was actually normalizing the immune system and helping the body, the immune system, function properly. And those people actually had better outcomes. So I'm just going to show you something here. There's a new study that came out, and this is really groundbreaking. So I'm just going to read this a little bit. So I don't know if you can read that. Okay, so there's the article there. So it's coming from the Journal of Biological Regulators and Homeostatic Agents, April-June of 2014. So this is related to cancer outcomes. So the size of a tumor, usually they're grading tumors and they say, oh, it's a big, they give it like how big it is and how much it's sort of gone into tissues of the body. They're kind of grading it on how bad it is or what the outcomes are. But I want you to listen to this carefully. Recent studies have shown that vagal nerve activity independently predicts prognosis in cancer. Here we take this one step further and show that when vagal nerve activity is high, so that helps when we do chiropractic care, we're actually making the parasympathetic or the vagal nerve system work properly and better. And we actually have a technology that measures that. It's called heart rate. Well, we'll just read it here. So here we take this one step further and show that when vagal nerve activity is high, cancer stage no longer predicts tumor burden. We examine whether vagal nerve activity indexed by something called heart rate variability, which is something we measure in our office using a technology. So this is an instrument here that people will put their hand in there, and this actually measures their heart rate variability, and this actually gives us a reading, and we can see how that system is working. And we can actually see the improvements in that when they're getting our care. So heart rate variability moderated the effects of cancer tumor growth. As would be expected, initially advanced tumor stages predicted higher tumor marker levels at follow-up than did early stages. However, this occurred only in patients with low vagal activity. And listen to this. In patients with advanced tumor stage at diagnosis, high vagus nerve activity predicted lower tumor marker levels compared to low vagal activity, estimating a cancer patient's prognosis by determining his tumor stage needs also to consider vagal nerve activity. This is huge. Higher vagal activity may even protect against adverse effects of advanced cancer stage. These findings support what we call neuroimmunomodulatory effects of vagal nerve activity on tumors. So that's huge. So this is something we actually use in our office. It's called heart rate variability. It's one of 3 things that we use to actually measure the health of your nerve system. So your nerve system health depends, your spine, the health of your spine becomes the health of your nerve system, becomes the health of your immune system. So if you have chronic diseases of any sort, we want you to understand that chiropractic isn't treating anything. Chiropractic doesn't make any treatments. And so it's not treating cancer and it's not treating heart disease or diabetes or whatever it is. The role of chiropractic is to make the nervous system function better by making the spine function better. So when the spine is healthy, the nervous system is healthy, the brain is stimulated properly, the vagus nerve can control the parasympathetic or the slow down, rest and relaxation, growth and repair part of your body. And so all that stuff works better. So basically, don't think of chiropractic as a treatment for something, but if you have a chronic disease, you better make sure that you're getting your spine and your nervous system as healthy as possible. That's the biggest blind spot in the healthcare system right now. So many people, exercising, eating right, like I've mentioned before, but if they're not getting their spine and the nervous system checked, that's a huge, huge thing that needs to be done that's not being done. Okay, so the most important thing I want you to understand that you want to be working on the master control system, making sure that your spine and nervous system are as healthy as possible. And I'm just going to show you a quick video of what the care looks like. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. So this is an image. This was a girl that had been coming to my office while I was in Europe. She had gotten over 5 years of care with me regularly. So keep in mind that people who are getting the care regularly have much better overall effects on their health. They're not just using it as a temporary treatment for something. So I would go through the spine, and as you can see, I'm just kind of moving the bone side to side to see that they're all, which ones are moving properly, which ones are not. So when there's an area that's stuck in the spine, we call that a subluxation. That's the word we use for it. So wherever a subluxation is, that means your nervous system is not working properly. So what I'm doing is I'm putting a very, very light touch to her skin. So she actually did get touched there. But what it does is it causes an automatic reaction for her brain to pay attention to her body, and her body spontaneously produces what we call a respiratory wave. So you understand how breathing is important in general, but that breathing can actually, if you can see it, it's actually going through her whole spine from top to bottom. So every single bone in her back is kind of getting mobilized, moved, and if you want to call it massage from the inside, but all that movement helps to stimulate her brain and keep her spine and nervous system healthy. So that's kind of what the care looks like in our office. So the technique is just brief touches in specific areas of the spine, and it produces what we call strategies for the body to start self-healing and self-regulating, to pay attention to itself, and it helps people become more resourceful. So you may be thinking, wow, there's a lot of stuff to take in, and it's pretty challenging, but I just tell people just take it one step at a time, especially as you're getting into the holiday season here, just to make a decision saying, okay, well, there's a lot of junk here on the table. I usually have 5 desserts. I'm only going to have 1 this time. I'm going to try to limit the sugars as much as I can within my house, so that when you go out, if you kind of splurge once or twice, but obviously there's so many parties, you have to be aware of that, okay? So biggest take home, your nutrition is massively important for your immune system, how you think, how you move, and the health of your spine and your nervous system. That's the biggest thing that is the take home. So if anybody watching this now, if you want to consider, maybe if you're locally in the Markham, Northeast Toronto GTA area, you can look at our office. I'm just going to show you quickly the website here one more time so you can take a look at that. So I'm actually in 2 different locations. So if you go to drmarcodc.com, that's sort of like a holder website, and I have this goes to my main office here. If you go on this side, onto the left, if you go to the right, I'm actually working in another office 2 days a week here. So if you're in the Kiel, North York area, that's where you would go here. If you're in the Markham Northeast GTA, you would go here. So anybody who's on this webinar, if you call our office, if you mention that you were on the webinar, you saw the webinar, and you'd like to have a consultation, especially if you'd like to bring in your kids. Normally in my office, the exam might be anywhere from $150 to $172, depending on the office that I'm in. It takes about an hour to run through the whole first initial exam. If you mention you saw the webinar and you'd like to get checked, I will do the initial exam for $85. And so it'll still take an hour, and I'll do all the same things that I'm doing normally, and I'll check your neurology and everything else. Just so parents get this. Remember how it said that children often have 10 to 12 colds during the course of the year? When I was in Italy, I used to work in Italy, and I actually had a mother bring 2 kids in. They were like 8 years old and 6 years old, and both of them, I think she said that each of them missed around 18 to 20 days of school a year. So we started working on those kids, and so the next year, as it came around again, she said this year they only missed 1 or 2 days of school. So if you can think about that impact, you know, kids not missing school, not being home, burdening mom, everything else, healthier kids, healthier brains, healthier nerve system, it's just a big, big thing. And so once again, I'd like to thank everyone for attending the webinar. Hopefully you had a lot of good information. It went a little longer than I was hoping, but I didn't know how long I could talk for hours on this stuff, obviously. For those of you who don't know, once a week, I usually send out a video tip on Mondays. So if you go to my website, there's a little form that you could fill in. You know, your name, email, that kind of thing. If you connect with our office, then you'll be on that service, even if you're not local and you're just anywhere in the world and you want to hear some more of this information. I try to share some good tips along the way. You could subscribe to the newsletter that way. And so that's the webinar. Thanks everyone for attending, and we'll see you all in the near future. Thank you.